Zelina was just 23, but in the fast-moving city of Zuberi, she already carried more weight on her shoulders than most. Bright, disciplined, and focused, she worked long hours as a medical intern in one of the busiest hospitals in the city. Her days were spent treating patients, and her nights buried in books, preparing for exams and dreaming of a better life. She had lost her parents at a young age and had been raised by her mother's older sister, Maseka. Their apartment was small and old, but Zelina never complained. She was grateful, hopeful, and determined to rise. Living with her in that cramped city flat was Naya, her childhood friend and now roommate. Naya was the opposite of Zelina in many ways. Loud, fashionable, and always active on social media. She was popular, but lacked the same drive and discipline. She had grown up with Zelina in the same neighborhood, and though they called each other sisters, there was always an invisible competition between them. Nia noticed how Zelina was constantly praised, how professors loved her, and how her future looked bright. And somewhere deep down, it stung. Still, on the surface, they laughed, shared meals, and called each other ride or die. But not all friendships are as loyal as they seem. One warm Friday afternoon, while sipping tea after a long hospital shift, Zelina received an email that would change everything. Her hands shook as she read the subject line over and over. Congratulations, you've been selected. She had been chosen for one of the most competitive medical fellowships in all of Africa, hosted in Nairobi. This program accepted only the top 1%, the brightest, most dedicated young medical minds from across the continent. Not only was it a major honor, but it also came with full financial support, travel, housing, mentorship, a monthly stipend, everything. For a girl who had grown up with nothing but dreams and determination, this was beyond big. It was the key to a whole new future. Zelina jumped up from the couch and screamed with joy, her voice echoing through the small apartment walls. She called out to Naya and Maseka, waving her phone in the air with tears in her eyes. "I got in! I actually got in!" She laughed, crying and smiling at the same time. Maseka hugged her, smiling tightly. "That's wonderful, my child," she said, patting her back. Nia put on her biggest smile, clapping and squealing. "Girl, I told you, you were made for this." But deep inside, their hearts felt something very different. While Zelina talked about packing, visas, and how she wanted to buy gifts for her mentors in Nairobi, both Maseka and Nia were lost in their own thoughts. Maseka had always seen herself as Zelina's savior, the one who raised her, the one who made her. She expected lifelong loyalty and dependence. This fellowship meant Zelina was flying too far, too high, too free. Maseka didn't like it. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. In her mind, she told herself that Zelina was getting too proud, too independent. She forgets who gave her everything, she whispered to herself later that night. Nia, on the other hand, was burning with quiet anger. What Zelina didn't know, or maybe had forgotten, was that Nia had applied for the same fellowship. She had worked on her application for months, even gotten help from an older cousin who had experience in the field. But her rejection email had come weeks ago. It stung badly, but she never told anyone. And now here was Zelina, smiling, glowing, celebrating. Every time Zelina mentioned Nairobi, it was like a knife turning deeper into Naya's pride. The jealousy didn't come all at once. It started as tiny thoughts. A glance that lasted too long, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, a compliment that felt forced. Nia told herself she was being silly, that she should be happy for her best friend. But the more Zelina prepared, the harder it got to pretend. She watched how everyone around them praised Zelina, reposted her success on Instagram, commented things like, "Girl boss," and "You deserve the world." Nia watched from the side, clapping publicly, but crying silently into her pillow. The spotlight had moved, and it wasn't on her anymore. Zelina, innocent and full of hope, didn't see any of this. She was too busy being grateful, trying to include her aunt and Naya in everything. She offered to pay for dinner, wanted to take cute friendship pictures before leaving, even told Naya, "When I get there, I'll find out if there's a way to recommend you too." She meant it, but it didn't matter. Jealousy had already planted its roots, and behind those smiles, something darker had begun to grow. After the excitement settled, things inside the apartment started to shift, not suddenly, but slowly. like a storm that begins with a quiet wind. Maseka, who had once praised Zelina for every little achievement, now began pointing out small things with a bitter edge in her tone. Ever since that email came, she's walking around like she owns the city, she muttered on phone calls to relatives. One scholarship and now she's forgetting who raised her. These little comments started piling up day by day. She'd say things like, "I hope she doesn't think she's too big to greet people now," or "It's funny how success can change someone's heart." At the same time, Nia's behavior shifted in ways Zelina didn't understand at first. She became distant, not obviously angry, but different. When Zelina shared updates about her travel plans or showed her documents proudly, Nia would just nod, say, "Cool," and go back to scrolling her phone. She stopped tagging Zelina in posts, started going out without telling her, and made little comments that stung without sounding too harsh. "Must be nice having everything fall into your lap," she once said. When Zelina got a call from the program coordinator, Zelina laughed it off, unsure if she was joking. The warmth they once had was fading. Dinners became quiet. Conversations became short. But the most dangerous part was what Zelina didn't see. The late-night conversations between Maseka and Nia when she was asleep or at the hospital. They sat together in the kitchen, sharing their frustrations and feeding each other's growing resentment. Maseka would say, "You see how she acts now, like she's better than us." Nia would respond, "She's forgetting who stood by her when she had nothing. Even I helped her edit that application." They began to see Zelina's success not as a celebration, but as a threat. Their bitterness connected them. In their eyes, Zelina was leaving them behind. Maseka felt disrespected. The girl she raised was now stepping out into the world without needing her. Nia felt invisible. The best friend she had walked every path with was now flying while she stood still. They never said it directly, but the thought was loud in both their minds. Why her? Why not me? What started as jealousy began to turn into something crueler. It wasn't long before they crossed a line they could never come back from. One night, while Zelina was working a night shift at the hospital, Maseka and Nia sat together again. This time, their conversation was colder. They didn't just vent, they started plotting. Maseka looked at Nia and said, "If she thinks she's better than us, maybe it's time to remind her she's not." Nia hesitated, but then she remembered every like, every comment, every praise Zelina got that she didn't. She nodded. That night, they made a silent agreement. If they couldn't rise with her, they would pull her down. And together, they began to plan something Zelina would never expect. Not from her aunt, and definitely not from the friend she called sister. It started one quiet evening when Zelina was working a night shift at the hospital. The apartment was silent. Only the soft ticking of the clock could be heard. Nia sat alone in their shared room, staring at Zelina's laptop, which lay open on the desk. She knew the password. They used to help each other with assignments, emails, and applications. But tonight, she wasn't opening it to help. Her hands hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Her heart raced. Then she took a deep breath and logged in. She went straight to Zelina's email, the same email linked to the prestigious Nairobi Fellowship. She scrolled through it, reading the congratulatory messages, the travel arrangements, the formal documents from the program team. Her stomach twisted with anger and jealousy. "Let's see how perfect they think you are after this," she whispered to herself. Then, she did something that would change everything. She composed a message pretending to be Zelina. The words she typed were rude, arrogant, and completely unprofessional. She insulted the fellowship staff, questioned their choices, and demanded they treat her like a star candidate. It sounded entitled and disrespectful, completely opposite of who Zelina really was. Nia hit send. Just like that, a storm was released with one click. While Nia's attack was digital, Maseka's move was more old school. She sat in the kitchen the next day with a blank piece of paper, a pen and rage bubbling in her heart. She wrote an anonymous letter, full of lies and poison. She claimed Zelina had paid someone to write her research project, that her academic results were fake, and that she had cheated her way into the fellowship. Maseka was clever. She didn't write anything in her usual style. She even asked someone from the building to drop the letter in a public mailbox so it couldn't be traced. Her goal was simple: plant a seed of doubt, something that would ruin Zelina's name without exposing who was behind it. They never talked about the full details after that night. They just knew their roles. Nia handled the emails. Maseka handled the letter. Their silence became a mask. Around Zelina, they acted the same, smiling, joking, asking about her travel plans, helping her pack. Nya even offered to take photos of her passport for the visa. Everything seemed normal. Zelina, with her kind heart and trusting soul, never noticed the change. She believed she was surrounded by love and support. But behind those smiles, her world was slowly being set on fire. The goal wasn't to hurt her physically. No, their plan was darker. They wanted to destroy her future, her reputation, her dream, and do it in a way that no one would ever suspect them. If the fellowship board believed Zelina had a bad attitude and a fake record, they would cancel everything. No questions asked, no warnings. Nia and Maseka felt powerful in those moments. For the first time in weeks, they weren't angry or bitter. They felt in control. She won't even know what hit her, Nia said one night. Masika nodded slowly. Let her fly too close to the sun. We'll watch her fall. And as the days passed, they waited for the damage to begin. Exactly 1 week after the sabotage, Zelina came home from a long hospital shift, exhausted but still glowing with excitement. She was only a few weeks away from flying to Nairobi, and every day felt like a step closer to her dream. But when she opened the apartment door that evening, she noticed a white envelope sitting on the floor, just beneath the mail slot. It had the official stamp of the fellowship board on it. Her heart skipped a beat, not out of fear, but excitement. Maybe it was her travel schedule or more official documents. She dropped her bag on the couch and tore the envelope open quickly. But as she read the words on the page, the smile on her face vanished instantly. Her hands began to tremble. The letter wasn't about final arrangements or congratulations. It was a formal notice, cold, distant, and crushing. The board had decided to revoke her fellowship due to ethical concerns surrounding her application. They cited inappropriate communication and integrity issues regarding her academic work. There was no room for appeal. It was over, just like that. Zelina froze. Her chest tightened. Her knees felt weak, and she collapsed onto the couch, staring blankly at the paper. She read it again and again. Her mind couldn't make sense of it. She had done everything right. She worked harder than anyone she knew. She respected the board, followed every rule, and never cheated a day in her life. How could they say this? What had gone wrong? Tears welled up in her eyes, and her hands covered her face as quiet sobs took over. Her dream, everything she had built, everything she had fought for, had been taken from her in a single page. She felt betrayed, but by who? She couldn't even imagine. The noise of her crying brought Maseka out of her room. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice full of false concern. Zelina, unable to speak, simply handed her the letter. Maseka read it quickly, then let out a long, dramatic sigh. "Oh no, no, this can't be," she whispered, pulling Zelina into her arms. She hugged her tightly, stroking her hair, whispering, "I'm so sorry, baby. Maybe they made a mistake. Maybe you can talk to someone." But behind that comforting tone, her eyes were calm, almost pleased. Everything was going exactly as planned. Naya returned home moments later and found Zelina crying on the couch. She rushed over, acting just as surprised. "Wait, what happened? Zelina, what's going on?" Zelina showed her the letter, her voice breaking as she explained. Naya widened her eyes, covering her mouth like she couldn't believe it. "Oh my God, they really did this to you," she said softly, sitting next to her and rubbing her back. "I don't get it. You're the most honest person I know. This doesn't make any sense." But as she leaned in to comfort her best friend, her lips curled into the smallest smile, the kind of smile you make when a secret plan works exactly the way you wanted. Zelina sat between the two women she trusted most, completely shattered, never imagining that both of them were the reason her dream had died. She blamed herself. She blamed the system. She wondered if someone else had lied about her, or if there had been some mix-up. But the truth was far more cruel. The people she loved the most had stabbed her in the back, and she didn't even see the knife. 3 days after Zelina's world came crashing down, she sat alone in a coffee shop trying to process everything. Her eyes were tired from crying, and her heart felt numb. She still hadn't figured out how everything went so wrong so fast. She barely noticed her phone buzz, and when she finally glanced at it, there was a message request from someone she didn't recognize. The name was Thando, a young journalist and popular investigative blogger known for exposing academic fraud and corruption across Africa. He had a reputation for chasing the truth, no matter how buried it was. Zelina hesitated before opening the message. It read, "Hi Zelina, I came across news of your revoked fellowship. I've followed the Nairobi program closely for years. Something about your case feels off. If you're open to it, I'd like to hear your side." She stared at the message for a long moment. Part of her didn't want to talk to anyone, but something in his words felt genuine, not like a reporter looking for a story, but like someone who truly wanted to understand. With a deep breath, she replied, "Okay, I'm willing to talk." They met at the same coffee shop the next day. Thando was calm, respectful, and didn't come with a camera or recorder. He simply listened. Zelina told him everything, from the moment she got accepted into the fellowship, to the strange rejection letter, to how she never sent any inappropriate emails or faked any work. She looked tired, but her honesty was clear in her voice. Thando asked questions carefully, jotting down notes in a plain notebook. The more he listened, the more something didn't sit right with him. He had covered enough real scandals to recognize when a case smelled fishy. Zelina's story didn't match the tone of the fellowship's decision. She had no past red flags, no history of misconduct, no online behavior that matched the accusations. He asked if she had told anyone about her application. She mentioned her aunt and her best friend Nia. Thando made a mental note. After they parted ways, Thando began digging quietly. He didn't want to alert anyone too early. He reached out to someone he knew inside the Nairobi Fellowship Board and asked vague questions about how complaints were handled. He also studied Zelina's email records and noticed some messages had odd language, unlike the ones she had sent earlier. Something felt artificial. He looked deeper and noticed one of the questionable emails had been sent from the same device that had also accessed her university document. Thando kept things to himself for now. He didn't want to give Zelina false hope, but in his gut, he knew someone had sabotaged her. He started looking into Nia and Masika carefully, without drawing attention. Their online footprints, their social behavior, even their recent posts gave away more than they realized. Thando wasn't just any blogger. He was smart, patient, and had exposed people more powerful than this before. And now, his instincts were sharp and focused fully on one mission: to find the truth and give Zelina her voice back. Thando knew the truth wouldn't be easy to find, but he also knew digital footprints rarely lie. He spent the next few nights sitting in front of his laptop, digging through everything he could access: email logs, device histories, timestamps. With Zelina's permission, he got into her email account and looked deeper into the inappropriate messages that had gotten her disqualified. They looked strange to him, not just the language, but the way they were written. The tone didn't match Zelina's usual calm and respectful style. It was rude, abrupt, and oddly personal. What caught his attention first was the login history. He noticed that the emails in question had been sent from the same IP address that was used frequently at the apartment Zelina shared with Nia. Not just the same Wi-Fi, but the same device. Thando used a basic forensic tool to trace the device signature, and what he found confirmed his suspicion. The device that sent the emails was registered to Nia's cloud backup. It was her laptop, not Zelina's. That was the first solid crack in the wall of lies. He didn't stop there. He remembered the letter, the anonymous one that accused Zelina of academic fraud. Zelina had a copy of it, folded and kept in her drawer, still too painful for her to look at. Thando scanned the letter and fed it into a handwriting comparison tool, a new AI program journalists had started using to expose forgeries and anonymous threats. Then, he asked Zelina to secretly collect a few handwritten grocery lists and notes written by Masika, without letting her know. Once Thando uploaded both samples, the results were clear. The curves, slants, pressure points, all matched. The anonymous letter wasn't so anonymous anymore. It had come from someone right inside Zelina's home. The AI program gave a 91% match between Masika's handwriting and the letter. That number was more than enough in the journalism world to raise alarms. To seal the investigation, Thando looked for any digital breadcrumbs. He found one. Nia had once taken a picture of Zelina's passport and stored it in her phone. She had sent it to herself via email for visa help, but the email she used to send it was the same one logged into when the inappropriate messages were sent to the fellowship board. Thando took screenshots, saved timestamps, and gathered every digital receipt that pointed to the truth. He organized the evidence into a folder: screenshots, login data, device fingerprints, AI handwriting analysis, and message timestamps. It wasn't just a theory anymore. It was undeniable proof. Thando sat back in his chair, staring at the screen filled with evidence. He had connected every dot. The betrayal was real, and now it was visible. Nia and Maseka hadn't just hurt Zelina. They'd committed fraud, deception, and character assassination. But what they didn't know was that someone had been quietly watching, following their lies, and putting every broken piece back together. Now, Thando was ready, not just to expose the truth, but to give Zelina the justice she never thought she'd get. Thando knew the truth needed to be seen by the world. Quiet justice wasn't enough, not after what Zelina had suffered. He spent 2 sleepless nights crafting the perfect exposé. He titled it, "How They Tried to Destroy Her Career, But Got Caught." It was bold, honest, and raw. The article began with Zelina's journey, an orphan raised by her aunt, working day and night to build her future, and earning a once-in-a-lifetime fellowship. Then it took a sharp turn, revealing how everything was snatched away, not by strangers, but by the very people she called family. He included everything: screenshots of Naya's device accessing Zelina's email, side-by-side comparisons of Maseka's handwriting and the anonymous letter, digital logs showing the email location, and even the false messages sent to the fellowship board. Thando didn't use fake names. He showed the truth, clear, undeniable, and backed by hard evidence. The final part of the story showed Zelina's resilience, how she kept going even after being betrayed and broken. As soon as he published the story on his blog and shared it on his social media pages, it exploded. Within hours, it started trending across Zuberi city. Comments poured in. People were shocked, angry, and deeply moved. Everyone was talking about the betrayal, the injustice, and the strength of a young woman who had been wronged by those closest to her. Hashtags like #Justice for Zelina and #She Deserved Better filled every platform. Influencers, activists, and students across the country reposted the exposé. Journalists picked up the story. Radio shows invited Thando and Zelina for interviews. Zelina, who had once cried alone in a quiet apartment, was now the face of courage and resilience. Messages of support flooded her inbox. Strangers offered opportunities. Universities reached out to reconsider her case. Even the Nairobi Fellowship Board released a statement saying they were shocked by the revelation and had launched an internal review. They admitted that their decision had been rushed and based on forged materials. Public pressure mounted quickly. As for Maseka and Naya, their names were now at the center of one of the city's biggest viral scandals. Old neighbors and friends unfollowed them, calling out their cruelty online. Maseka's workplace launched an inquiry into her conduct. Naya's social media accounts were locked within hours, but it was too late. The truth was already out there. The internet doesn't forget. Zelina didn't say much publicly at first. She needed time, but when she finally posted, it was simple and powerful. She wrote, "The truth always finds its way. Thank you for standing with me." That one post gathered thousands of likes and comments from people who had been following her story from the start. In the middle of all the chaos, Thando quietly watched from his small apartment. He didn't do it for fame. He did it because the truth mattered. And now, that truth had not only restored a young woman's dignity, but also reminded an entire city that karma doesn't miss. Zelina's name was cleared. Her spirit, once shattered, began to rise again, this time with the entire city standing behind her. After the viral exposé shook the entire city, it didn't take long for the Nairobi Fellowship Board to respond. Within days, they released a public statement, admitting that their decision to revoke Zelina's selection had been based on forged and misleading evidence. They expressed deep regret for the emotional and professional damage caused to her, but they didn't just stop there. They issued a formal apology, addressed directly to Zelina, and announced that her fellowship had been reinstated with full benefits. The apology was broadcasted across platforms, making it clear that she had been wronged and deserved justice. Zelina received the news with a mix of relief and emotion. After everything she had been through, she finally felt seen and heard. But what came next surprised even her. A much bigger and more prestigious medical program in Cape Town, South Africa, reached out to her. They had followed her story and were moved not just by her academic excellence, but by her strength and grace under pressure. They offered her a spot in their elite fellowship program, one that trained the top minds in global medicine and innovation. It was more than she had ever imagined. This time, Zelina didn't cry from heartbreak. She cried from joy. She accepted the offer, knowing this opportunity came not just from her qualifications, but also from her story, her truth. People all over Zuberi watched her journey unfold like a movie. A young woman who had almost lost everything, now rising stronger than ever. Major news channels invited her for interviews. She sat on talk shows, shared her journey, and spoke about the importance of mental strength, truth, and never giving up. Students across the city looked up to her. She became a symbol of hope, especially for girls from underprivileged neighborhoods who dream big but fear being held back by the people around them. Zelina's story told them it was okay to rise, even when others tried to drag you down. People who had once ignored her now reached out with admiration. Even strangers who had never met her sent messages saying how much her story had changed their perspective. Schools invited her to speak. Non-profit organizations wanted her to be their ambassador. She wasn't just a medical intern anymore. She had become a voice, a light, a reminder that truth and talent always shine through. As for Nia and Maseka, their silence was deafening. The internet had already decided their place in the story. While Zelina moved forward with grace, they faded into the background, facing the consequences of their own choices. Zelina didn't waste energy on revenge. Her success was her justice. With her bags packed for Cape Town and a heart full of strength, Zelina stood in front of her apartment one last time. She looked up at the sky, smiled softly, and whispered, "I made it." She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but after everything she had faced, she was more than ready. This was no longer the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one written by her, on her terms, with the world now watching in awe. The wave of truth didn't stop with Zelina's redemption. It came crashing down on those who tried to break her. Maseka, once seen as a respected elder in her extended family, found herself completely cut off. Her relatives, ashamed and angry at what she did to her own niece, refused to speak to her. Family gatherings went silent whenever her name came up. No one wanted to be associated with someone who could destroy the dreams of a girl she raised like a daughter. Maseka stayed indoors, facing the shame alone. She tried to justify her actions, but no one was listening anymore. Naya's downfall was just as swift. Her dream job offer was withdrawn the moment the company saw the viral exposé. The medical community, especially in Zuberi and Nairobi, distanced themselves from her completely. Universities removed her from future program lists. Her name became a red flag. No one wanted to hire someone who could betray a friend and manipulate the system. She tried to delete her social media accounts and disappear, but the internet had already marked her. The same charm and confidence she once used to make connections now meant nothing. Her lies had caught up with her, and this time, there was no one to protect her. While the two of them faced the consequences of their actions, Zelina was living a new chapter. She packed her bags and stood at the edge of a brand new beginning. Cape Town welcomed her with open arms. The program she joined wasn't just prestigious, it was life-changing. Surrounded by mentors, new friends, and the best medical minds on the continent, she finally felt like she was where she belonged. But she was no longer the same girl who had cried quietly in her room. She was stronger now, wiser, and deeply aware of who she was. The day she boarded her flight, she didn't look back. She carried her past like a badge, not of pain, but of survival. As the plane lifted into the sky, Zelina stared out of the window, eyes steady, heart full. She wasn't running anymore. She was rising, and this time, no one could stop her.